as an auditioner, like when you have emotions on the line and stuff, and you're like, I can't believe they cut me off. I didn't get to play the last 2 excerpts. I can't believe it. Like, I was always like that, you know? And then I'm sitting on the thing and I'm like, ugh, next, you know? Like, you know, like no empathy whatsoever.
I had such a great time with today's guest. We could have chatted for many more hours, and I'm sure we will in the future on a round 2. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we're talking today with Noah Reitman, who is the assistant principal bassist of the Vancouver Symphony. He's been there since 2015, does many other things, teaches at Idyllwild here in California, Southern California in the summer, teaches at the VSO School of Music. He's had a really cool path through the music world. He's been doing a lot of cool projects with his wife, Maggie. They're the founders of Purple Mollusk Music. That's all linked up to in the show notes. So definitely check that out. So we talk about all kinds of things. Life in 2021, what that's been like for both of us, and in Canada in particular, and things are changing on every week and month. So, but it was particularly locked down while we were chatting. Noah's path through the music world, all sorts of lessons learned, a mindset, so much more. I really hope you enjoy this. Definitely check out Noah's website, noahreitman.com. Follow him on YouTube. That's all linked up in the show notes. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Upton Bass, Dorico, and Ear Trumpet Labs. More on them later, but let's dig into this conversation with Noah Reitman. What's Vancouver like in early June? Is it summery or is it?
It's beautiful out. It's beautiful out. I can turn the camera around here. You can see it.
Look at that.
Like just nice and summery out there.
Oh, man.
Plants in full bloom. Yeah, it's been going well. I want to make sure, is everything okay with my setup?
Yeah. No, you're great. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Sound great. Everything. Yeah. That's good. So I have yet to be to Vancouver. I can't believe I haven't made it up there yet. I was just in Seattle 2 weeks ago. I got a lot of family in Seattle. And it was hilarious. It was like 74 and sunny. And I came back to San Francisco and it was like 52 and cloudy and extremely windy. And finally the sun came out, but it's been like, there's that May gray, June gloom sort of thing, that California gets. But
gloom.
Yeah. But it's been like more hardcore than usual this year. Or maybe I'm just getting softer every year I live in California. I don't know. There could be that too.
Totally. Totally. I talked to my mom. I grew up in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I talked to my mom, and she's like, it's 62 degrees today. It's like it's the middle of winter, And I'm like, 62 degrees is a day where we're at the beach. Maybe we'll go in the water,
Yeah.
So, but, that's also West Coast. Like, West Coast has just interesting weather. So you're from the Midwest, right?
I'm from South Dakota, so I have no right to complain.
Yeah.
Everything is better. I can never say anything bad about South Dakota on the podcast because my mother listens to the podcast, and I'll hear from her if I talk to her. But I think it's safe to say South Dakota's weather is not one of its best features. So.
No. I totally. But it's beautiful out there, so it's really something.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Vancouver it's a really beautiful place. It rains a lot here, but talking to someone who's in California, like I just realized, I feel a little guilty because I'm always like, it's always raining here, but in California, you need any rain you can get. So I imagine, that's something not nice to talk to a Californian, right? A Californian about. But, I do miss home.
It's been interesting because, I'm now 6 years. I've been living here 5 or 6 years. So I've been living here long enough that, I had rose-tinted glasses, if that's the right term, when I moved here because I was just so sick of the snow. And I know you spent time in Michigan, right? But
yeah.
So, you know that world. But I'm South Dakota and then Chicago. That was my whole life. And, going somewhere where there just was no snow was, the greatest thing. And I was, I would, look at every palm tree and think, I can't believe I'm by and now I have 4 palm trees out there. I don't even think of them. But yeah, going through, especially these last few fire seasons. Woo! There was one day in 20, and of course it's in the middle of the pandemic and everything. And then there was this one day where the sun never came up in San Francisco because it was. I don't know if you saw these photos, but it looked like you were on Mars. And boy, talk about a weird day. That was so I'm sort of realizing some of the rougher aspects of living in California.
Yeah. We had the same thing up here. We had the same thing, and it was really rough because we had to quarantine. We went to the States last summer to see family, and we had to quarantine our way back. And we thought, oh, this won't be too bad. You know, we have this nice deck. We'll be fine. We have young daughter. And then the fires came in, and it was just like, okay, I guess we can't even open the windows. You know, it's just wild. It's wild. It's sad. That's a whole nother non-bass related issue. It's just like, my God, what are we gonna do? But hopefully they'll figure it out, or we will figure it out.
Yeah, hopefully. It gets scary to see places where it usually doesn't, that sort of thing doesn't happen. Because, I mean, I know, like, my brother lives in Portland, and it got rough over the fire season last year in Portland, too. So, I mean, I guess it's a little more common, or it is more common in California in general. I know Southern California, and then here in the Bay Area, because of all the mountains, you know, the only way for that air to escape is the bay, you know, getting out through the Golden Gate. And just the weather patterns, oftentimes it'll be that cool air over the ocean, and then that air in the bay will just get more and more toxic. And so I'm learning some of the negatives of living. But still, even with all that, I don't want to dig my car out ever again. So I will take the.
Fair enough.
I'm so sick of snow, and you know, climate change is affecting there too. You know, like, I don't know if that's happening in Michigan, but Chicago has been getting these polar vortexes in recent years where it'll drop down to like -50 Fahrenheit. And that's I've never been there during one,
thanks.
but exactly. So
no thanks. Because I came. So I was at the New World Symphony, and then I got the job here. Mm-hmm. And I loved it down in New World. I loved everything about New World, almost everything. But we can get to into that later. But no, I came up here and I was just like, oh, I'm so glad to be on the West Coast again. You know, the lifestyle is so. I don't know. Even though it's Canada, you know, it's still a little bit of that. Like, we were the last to be sort of established, and like there's more of a you can do whatever you want vibe. I don't know if you feel that way about San Francisco.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And I can totally see that being, because Canada is such a vast country, and like, you know, you look at these major areas, they're so far apart. Vancouver probably has a lot more in common with Seattle and Portland than a lot of other parts of Canada, in many ways at least.
Yeah, it does. It certainly does. It's funny actually, because do you have any idea what the population of Canada is?
It's like 25 million, 30 million?
35 million.
Oh, so it's California.
But think about that. Okay.
Yeah.
California is bigger, like 40, right?
Yeah.
So like this, but you look at the map, if you look at a globe, there's like a 20% chance if you just like put your finger on a globe, it'll be Canada. Like, it's a massive country with nobody in it. So like, in fact, like those mountains over there, like if you go over those mountains, like the chances of you needing to be rescued by a helicopter are very high. Like there's nothing past those mountains. Whereas like whenever I fly out of LA, you know, just like you like get off the ground and it's just like people for like hundreds of miles. There's houses now and stuff, you know, 100 miles at least. There's still a desolate area in California, but it's really cool. I love being in Canada. It's a really interesting, and British Columbia in general. I mean, you just got nature like 10 minutes away in every direction. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool city.
It seems like many of the things I like about the Bay Area, but like kind of next level in terms of the nature. Like one thing I love here, I mean, you get to like Vancouver, this is a crazy expensive town and kind of like a silly place to live in many ways, just in terms of the cost. Yeah. But then you're like, okay, but I get it. You know, like my morning run takes me by the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm like looking at, it's like where the oceans meet the beautiful hills, and I understand it. I mean, I look at photos of Vancouver or just like what that's like, and it's like what a great place to be connected to nature like that. And then also have I love cities. I don't know about you, but I like the energy of cities, and that just seems like such a exciting city, and just what I know about Vancouver, it seems like a really vibrant place to be as an artist, or probably anybody.
Yeah, actually, it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's funny we haven't even really mentioned bass yet. That's kind of cool.
That's the secret of this podcast. I have basses in the name, but it's just about whatever. So it's a nice way to have a niche. I learned, but it's all about bass, really. Though I mean, like life is bass, and bass is life, and so. Well,
what's pretty funny about it is like when I got started, I mean, I'll talk about a little bit. Like, I mean, I grew up in LA, and it's so funny because I studied with Dave Young in high school. Mm-hmm. David Young, I don't know if you know him, probably from Golden Gate or something. Or,
I did the Roboff Institute, LA. Yeah, he was one of the people. And I just know him kind of through Cole. Like he and I know each other. So
yeah, and he sort of like exposed me to what like classical music was. I hadn't really, I mean, my dad had listened to classical music when I was a kid, and then he passed away when I was 7, and then when I was 12 or so I found the bass, and it was like, wait, I sort of vaguely remember what this is. Anyway, I was in Southern California, and Southern California, I only realized once I left, has this like incredible tradition of classical music. Mm-hmm. Like Heifetz was there, and just like the studios, like the film scoring and all that stuff. It's just it's got this like magical vibe. And I didn't even realize it until I left. I was like so hungry to get a job, in an orchestra. Mm-hmm. But the cool thing about being a bass player is like you're just like a hired gun, and that means you just have to be open to traveling anywhere for your art. And so would I have known that I would end up in Vancouver or at least be in Vancouver right now, like as a kid? Or no, but that's part of the adventure. That's like you say like bass is the vehicle, but totally bass is the vehicle. If you're an accountant, you can get an accountant in this, be an accountant in the city that you're in, like you don't need to like go find a job to be an accountant in some far off city, mm-hmm. But as a bass player, you got to go where they'll pay you to do it. And so there's almost this like fatalistic thing of like, wow, I'm Canadian permanent resident now. I just had a daughter that was born a Canadian citizen, who would have thought,
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing about, the bass. I think if you want to talk about bass as a vehicle, it'll take you wherever.
What is an American style of bass? Here's Gary and Eric from Upton Bass on the topic.
So there's a joke about American instruments, all right? If I can take 4 violins and go to let's say a top-notch violin appraiser, and he can take the first one out and look at it and go, well, this one's clearly Italian because of all these features. Next one, oh, this is French because of all these features. Next one, no, this is English because of these features. 4th violin, they can't tell what it is, and then they go, it's American. It's got a little bit of everything.
Learn more about their Bostonian, American-style model and so many other things that they have to offer you at uptonbass.com. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. After several years of planning, I'm so happy that my course, Beginner's Classical Bass, is out on Discover Double Bass. This course is made up of 66, yes, that's a lot, video lessons which cover a wide range of topics on classical double bass, starting from taking your bass out of the case, which is very fun to film, and Jeff Chalmers of Discover Double Bass and I have a great blooper reel about that, and leading to different bow strokes such as staccato and portato. The topics also include posture, simple scales and arpeggios, left-hand technique, bowing technique, simple pieces which are fun to play, practice tips, and much more. You can learn more through the link in the show notes or just visit discoverdoublebase.com/Jason Heath. It's part of the craziness of being a musician, but also part of the joy of being a musician. And like when I start to I think about where bass took me, even like in college, I went to Russia in college. I did the American Russian Youth Orchestra, which is no more, but was like now in retrospect was like one of the most bonkers, couple months of my life. And then, all over the world, you name it. And just like it's incredible, where and it's fun. It's so different from other professions. I went back to school and got a music ed degree in the mid 2000s, and it was so funny to go do that because I was in that mentality of if I do everything right and cross my T's and am willing to move anywhere, though there are positive aspects to that as well. It's like I might get a job, and to go into education, people think I described, it's like, oh, I wonder if I can get a job, and they said, what, are you crazy? Of course you're going to get a job. job. It's like, what kind of job do you want? You want to do this or that? You know, you can live whatever you want to do. And that was such an interesting and kind of refreshing, honestly, mindset to have, because I'd been so used to just oh, please let something work out somewhere, maybe, you know. So that was just my crazy little arc.
Yeah, and I find what's really interesting about this time, and I've really been enjoying listening to a lot of your podcasts, because you're talking to all these people that 20 months ago, the only time I would ever see them in my life, in the flesh, would be sitting in a waiting room of an audition, waiting for results. And not talking to them and being nice to them, because I like to be a nice person, but you've got to be focused, right? You can't talk to them or see them, you know. That's the only time I would see these people. But now the pandemic said no more auditions, and it was the fates, you know, the angel said all right, creative people, you don't have to worry about this anymore, for a while. So go be creative doing something else. And it's been really exciting to see all these audition circuit people doing fun projects. It was so cool that guy Jonathan Borden to check out his YouTube videos. Really cool stuff. You know, wow, he, you know, it's all these people being mini producers and mini videographers, just coming up with content that you can enjoy, and it's just been so fun to see people explore something other than just taking auditions, you know. And I hope that we can just keep that going forward, of just people feeling they have the room to express themselves, you know. And it's cool. I mean, you're producing more podcasts right now than ever, probably, I would imagine, right? I mean, you're just going wild. Yeah,
it's been interesting, because I had been going into a phase of only doing things on the road, and of course now none of us have been on the road for the last year and change. So, but I just found myself doing a little bit more of I don't know if you call it base journalism or what, but I would go to a place for a couple weeks and bring my microphones, and I went to Australia in fall of 2019, and I talked to maybe 11, 12 people. I did the same thing in New York City, fall of 2018, and I see that coming back, and the ISB conventions, and so it's been interesting getting back into doing remote all the time. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. It has been really interesting as somebody who's I've sort of been inadvertently preparing for a pandemic for many years, because I'm so, you know, I work in the industry, and I don't playing is maybe 10% of what I do, you know. That would probably be generous. So, but it's been interesting to see all these audition takers or people with full-time jobs, and these really high performers, right? Olympic level performers in terms of their skills. See so many of them pivot, like Jonathan Borden or many other people, and try these creative projects. And it's been just, I'll be curious to see how many people keep with it, how many of people got the bug, how many people realized how quickly the rug, I mean, who'd have thunk that this would have happened, right? And now, hopefully this is a once in a century thing. The indications seem likely that, but just if anyone ever needed a shakeup to think that, oh, maybe this is, you know, it's not like this was a particularly stable field anyway, but boy, you never thought that you'd see the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra out of work indefinitely. You know,
I know, and it really makes you think about their business model in general. I mean, I wonder how many people in the Met, and I have several very good friends in the Met, so I hope they don't hear this and curse me out. But how do you like sitting in the pit for 5 hours a night, 5 days a week? Is it your life's calling? That, or, you know, I have seen some very interesting stuff coming from some of my friends in the Met. I hope that they can feel a sense of agency for their own lives outside of the orchestra. But actually, one of the things I've gotten involved. So we can talk. I'd love to talk about my background and sort of base origin story, but I can talk about so I have a couple pandemic projects. One of which was I'm president of the local here. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'll talk a little bit about union sort of mentality, which is something that's pretty interesting, because when I started, I didn't necessarily. I was like, oh, maybe I want to get into like the New York Phil or something. Like, look at that salary there. That's like a good job, And yeah, they didn't. That job didn't come out of like nowhere, right? Like, it's not like some like rich guy in New York was like, we're gonna pay them all like a living wage. No, like these people, like over decades, they fought hard to get those good salaries through union bargaining. And so I kind of got excited about the idea of like, how can we turn the union into a 21st century organization? It's a little behind the times right now. Streaming is there. So that's one of my pandemic projects, which has been basically like going up against a stone wall. But it's very an interesting thing to think about, like being in the union, because let's face it, like most musicians, when given the opportunity to play, would like do it for free or for very little money. But that's not a way to sustain the art form.
Right.
So that's been one of my pandemic projects, is to think more about that kind of stuff.
It's so important. It's one of those things that I learned as I've been a union member since I was, 24. So a long time now, over a couple decades plus. But I, like many people, I'd play the union gigs that came along. I'd play the whatever $100 gigs that came along. And I realized over the years, the $100 gigs, they're still paying $100. My Elgin Symphony contract or subbing with the orchestra or this or that, these continue to grow with inflation. And so it's been really interesting. And it's been interesting talking with some people. Like I had a couple people on the podcast that have been pretty heavily involved in the Peter Roffet from the LA Phil. Actually, I just had on, and he was involved in just about every LA Phil negotiation, contract negotiation. And you just look at where and we got in depth. It was cool. I got in touch with him because he'd been doing cool YouTube videos, and I didn't even realize he had that whole. And then a couple of years before that, Tom Mendel, who was the president of the Theater Musicians Organization, I think. I forget exactly what the AFM branch is for theater musicians, but he was the bassist for Hamilton in Chicago and has done, he's like the top Broadway guy in Chicago, basically. Yeah. Just talking through the complexities of that. It's a complicated thing.
Oh man, it's so complicated. I can't even. I thought like you just go in a room and you're like, you have to pay us more, and like, no, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. You're like, okay, well, in this situation, we need a 25-minute break. And, if you're going to do a third movie in the week, if you want to do 3 of the Harry Potter, you're going to have to pay overtime on that third service. And then, management didn't do it. So now the union's got to get involved and like grieve it. And it's got to go this and that. And then everybody's just like, oh, sweet, an extra $150. Thanks. But there's this like the whole, anyway, I'm not involved in that. Luckily, there's someone at the union. I'm more about like vision. I want to see like a future where the union is like something that people are proud to be a member of again. I feel like most people in our generation, because the pension has had its issues, big issues, they see the union as like this thing that they have to be a part of. And they're right. It is like a little bit of a burden, and I want to move it into that front direction. So that forward-thinking direction. And I'm talking with some other local presidents, and I've been talking with the vice president of Canada about different ways we can do that. But I can't think of a more boring podcast topic than union bargaining. I really can't think of one. I don't know. Maybe library books.
Well, right. I'll tell you, there's probably it might not be a large audience, but there's probably an audience of at least a couple dozen people that would be like all about union negotiation podcasts. But
yeah, right. Yeah. They're all like, yeah. They're the people that come to the conventions. That's another thing. Anybody loves the opportunity to go to drink with, their brethren, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
The one thing you can't do with that, I'm sad that ISB is not going to be in person this year, because that's the most fun, right? Is like going to party after the gigs,
That's what it's all about. Yeah, no, it's a bummer. We'll see how it goes. But and it's too bad it wasn't just like 2 months later, because things. I don't know how it's going in Canada. I mean, I know the border, I think, is still closed as we record early June.
Sucks.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's crazy, but I mean, at least here in the States, or certainly in the Bay Area, people are vaccinated to a point where it's getting pretty close to normal. It's not, and certainly places like Texas, they just have
they opened up.
Or Florida has been open for like a while, but even here, which has been pretty restrictive, it's starting to and seasons are being announced, and we're getting back. And I know things have been up and down in Canada, but it's we can leave the union topic for sure. But I mean, one more thing. One more.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
You gotta wonder if just like pulling the rug out of so many people worldwide, like this, if maybe that will have a positive effect on just the perception of unions. Because like I get the problems of unions, but I also get there are some clear, and I've been a member of the various teachers unions, and so I've certainly I haven't thought as deeply about that as many, but I understand the importance of their role for many professions, certainly musicians as well.
Yeah, I mean, just look at, I'm sure, like, when you're talking to freelancers, like, those guys hurt from the pandemic. Most orchestras, with the exception of the Met and I think the Nashville Symphony and a couple others, most orchestras paid their musicians. They paid their they honored their contracts. I mean, we all took cuts. Everybody took cuts. Some people took long-term cuts, like Boston and New York. And I think they took like 4-year cuts. So, I mean, I saw that and I was like, gee, you'll never get that back. That's what I thought. You'll never get the compounding on that, the compounding interest. But like in the time of like really scary times, it was the union musicians or the people playing under union contracts that survived. And I hope that sends a positive message to, because like, for instance, like in Nashville is a right to work state. There's people getting bought out all the time in Nashville, that they'll never see returns on that, whereas like the old school union types, they're sitting on great residual check payments. I mean, you got to think of it, the union, not as like something from on the waterfront where it's like this like shady organization. You got to think of it, it's like it's your lawyer. It's like a high-powered artist is going to have a lawyer that like sits and like thinks about all these things. No, like for $200 a year or whatever you're paying, like you have someone in your corner who's going to like do all that work for you, and be your backstop if you're going to do it yourself. And I think it's a really cool part of the profession. And I'm sure as a teacher you saw too, like people in the private school world, they didn't make nearly as much as public school, right? Because of the union representation.
Yeah, particularly in the Midwest. Yeah. I mean, that's Illinois or suburban Chicago where I was. You had. I remember I was pretty shocked by how you're not. There are higher level lifestyles than that, certainly, but it was remarkable to me how you could live a comfortable life, doing that job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, is a music teacher. He's also a bass player, Eddie Haspatcher. He's a great guy, and he is a wonderful orchestra teacher. And he just moved back to Michigan, actually. And yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool to see people, And my father-in-law was also a teacher for 35 years, and he's retired and in great health, and it's just like it's a good life, and people they get distracted by the glitz and glamour, I think, of the stuff, and they don't realize there's a way to be a musician and put food on the table.
If you're in the right place and you find the right job, it can be a wonderful lifestyle. I resisted music education because both my parents were teachers, and then I got burned out on the audition scene, and I thought, and my wife decided to go to medical school, and I thought, we need some income in the Heath household, because it's going to get pretty grim for a decade plus. And I had this like mini career as a public high school orchestra director, and I found it amazingly satisfying, and it's something that 18-year-old Jason would have thought was really lame, but it was the salary was great. I was able to just play the gigs that I liked, and I think a lot of folks, wherever you're at, I have a lot of friends who are public school orchestra teachers and bassists in Las Vegas. For some reason, there are a bunch of bassists that do that, and they play some shows and they do this, and they have a sweet setup. And so if you find the right setup, it can be a great and music. I was actually much more. This is generalizing, but I was much more musically fulfilled teaching high school orchestra and playing a few gigs than like playing every single stinking gig I could scrape and every community orchestra.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I remember when I was living in New York. When I was so I went to Michigan. I studied with Diana Gannett there, and that was great. And then I went to Indiana, and funny, the first time I ever found you was back then when you interviewed Mr. Hurst. I've told you this before, but you interviewed Mr. Hurst with John Grillo, I think it was.
Oh yeah,
and
yep.
And Mr. Hurst was, when I was there, he was like, "Oh, John Grillo, I love that guy." He's like, "Yeah, he came to Bloomington and he was like, I hate it here. There's no deli." And I had the same thought. There's no good pastrami in Bloomington, India. There's no Jewish people in southern Indiana. That's just like, there's not a single one other than people going to Indiana University. So, but anyway, but I loved that. It was so fun to hear. He's such an amazing teacher, and I got so excited about going to school with him there. But then after that, I went to New York City because I wanted to live the life. I wanted to try it. So I did a 1-year degree with David Grossman at Manhattan School. Mm-hmm. And just got into the scene. And let me tell you, some of those gigs, wow. Like I did this one orchestra. I did it with my friends, Ali Cook and Dan Tosky. We both did this gig, and some other bass players who was there. Anyway, this guy had like grand ambitions like they all do, right? Of course, no one would hire him as a conductor other than himself, right? So he's like, yeah, within 3 years, I'm expecting to pay you guys a salary. So we did a gig, right? 200 people in the orchestra. I think he was paying us like $60 a service or something, right? Show up to the concert. There's 20 people in the audience. 20 people. There's 4 times more people on stage than there are in the orchestra. 5 times more people. Gives us all a post-dated check, and the check bounces for everybody.
No.
Like, I didn't even know that was a real thing, Anyway, why did I? Oh yes, but that was when I was trying to scrap it together. Sometimes now I have this dream because we've worked so little this year. Like we only did 18 weeks of work this year, and they couldn't put everybody on the stage, so we didn't even end up working that much. And we got a significantly larger portion of our salary, and it just thought to myself like, man, it would be so fun to have like a job where you're doing other things, creative stuff, and then just gig when you want to, and it's so fun actually to like the traveling. Like when I was in New York, I would like play with the Binghamton Philharmonic, that was like 3 hours away, and it was fun. You meet all these new people, you go out for drinks afterwards, no obligations, and like it's great. It's just so much fun. And I do miss that lifestyle. The grind is a little much sometimes,
This episode is brought to you by Dorico. And one of the things that struck me about Dorico when I first opened it up was this innovative user interface design. There are 5 different modes. There is setup, write, engrave, play, and print mode. And here is Senior Product Manager Daniel Spreadbury on why they set it up like this.
As they are presented to you on the screen, they're kind of there in a strip at the top left-hand corner of the screen, and they're very prominent. You can whack them with your mouse, or if you're using a Surface, you can tap them with your finger, and that basically then changes the whole UI of the program.
It is such an innovative design. It makes working for me so much cleaner in music notation software. I have become such a fan. I use this piece of software every single day. Check them out out at Dorico.com. That'll take you to their page on Steinberg's website. And there's a free version, Dorico SE, that'll let you do practically everything the program does with up to 2 parts. So that's perfect if you're working with a student or making exercises or that kind of thing. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Dorico. This episode is brought to you by Ear Trumpet Labs. They make an incredible mic for upright bass called the Nadine, and 6-time Grammy-winning jazz bassist and former Contrabass Conversations guest, Christian McBride, is a big fan. Christian says, as an acoustic bassist, it's very important for me to have this instrument amplified as naturally as possible. What I love about this microphone is that it makes the instrument sound exactly how I hear it in my head. Honestly, I don't know if you can get a better review than that. The Nadine is an instrument-mounted condenser mic with an incredibly clear, natural sound and great feedback rejection. Ear Trumpet Labs is offering a free t-shirt with mic purchase from their website. Just visit www.eartrumpletlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and learn more about Nadine. It's an exciting lifestyle, and it's funny because I did the road warrior thing in Chicago. I was driving 50,000 miles a year for a while. I did that for 7 years.
Yeah.
And I did my high school thing, and then I moved out here with a podcast and no real plan. And I started to play some gigs, and I realized, oh, wait a minute, this is the exact same thing I used to do in Chicago. It's just different people in better weather. And I was just, is the same type of person, that violist who's like playing in playing in Monterey and playing in Stockton and Modesto and subbing a little bit in the opera once in a while, and they don't
Silicon Valley Symphony, right?
Yeah, Silicon Valley Symphony. Yeah, you exactly.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting, but there's something sort of fun about that variety for sure. But I think, at least for me, I tend to remember the highlights and forget all those like long drives, or certainly in Chicago, like the icy road back from Springfield, Illinois for, I think I walk out with $380 for the week or something,
Yeah.
Spent that much on gas, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And I do love those gigs though, and I love the people that do them because they're doing it for fun. I mean, yes, they're doing it for like a living, especially the younger people. But like, these are people that like, it's joyous to go and work. And sometimes, the job is not joyous. What's been really funny at the union this year, we talk about it, we laugh, me and the business agent, is that we haven't gotten a single harassment complaint this year. Now, I'm not talking like harassment, like, really serious stuff. I'm talking about like the grown-up equivalent of like, he hit me, like that kind of thing, of just like people spending every day next to each other, and eventually like the little things like blossom into like really big things. And you forget like about the joy of just like sitting down and playing your instrument, like, oh my God, somebody's paying me to play like Shostakovich symphonies. Like, what? Like, I don't have to do it for free. I would do it for free. Don't tell anybody, And it's a really special gig, but sometimes people get a little tired on it. So I hope this year, going back to that point I made earlier, I hope this year has given people some pause to like reflect on what they enjoy about what they're doing, and maybe enhance it with other activities in their lives,
You're reminding me of we had this audition preparation class at Northwestern. Rex Martin, the tuba professor at Northwestern, taught it and brought all these people in. And he was telling a story. He was never in the Chicago Symphony, I don't think, but he did a bunch of 1 years. So like it was temporary, and he was talking about I forget who was conducting me. It was one of these things like he was just watching the musicians come off stage after the concert. And one of the violinists came off literally with tears in their eyes because it was such a great concert. And then like the trombone player came off like bitching about some like little like something or other. I just thought that was just like such a perfect summation of I think back to like subbing in Lyric. Both the guys have retired, so it's safe to say that, but like the principal and assistant principal would sit there, and one would put the tuner on A440 and the other guy would put it on like A442, and they'd been doing that for decades. It's like this disagreement, that just like was emblematic of many other disagreements within that orchestra. So
two hertz just two hertz difference, but a world apart.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I find that it's pretty funny. The funny thing is though that like I feel like the better the orchestra I've played with, the more people complain. But they're not. Complaining is a mean word because it makes it sound like they don't. But what it is it's like it's like this is a person with like exacting standards, in their life, and that shows in the music making. Unfortunately, they have to also like sometimes it also expresses itself in talking about colleagues or something. But I find that like people just they're hard on themselves, so they project that onto how they talk about everything in their lives. I think that at the heart of it, these people really care. They really care. And I'm talking about bass. It's funny, like I got started and I feel like I was fairly like naturally good at it, like naturally good at like the basic elements of it. Like vibrato was something that came pretty naturally to me. And I started on the guitar when I was 7. So when I found the bass at 12, I was like, oh, you only have to play one note at a time? Like, this is easy, And I was wrong. Just to, spoiler alert, I was wrong. It's not easy. But, I was kind of a little like twerp. I was kind of like, I don't know, kind of like felt, but what that really was like an insecurity, about where I was, like I'm just going to go ahead and apologize, because I have this platform. I'm going to apologize to Katie and Dominic Thoreau. Those guys really were very nice to me. And I was very insecure at the time, but we sat in youth orchestra together. And they're just like great players. And I was always kind of like, I don't know, what's the word? Like, whoa, And so instead of being like, huh, I was like, oh yeah, And then I totally got my ass handed to me in every place I went after that. And the fun thing about that is like you meet all these players that are better than you, and it just like whittles away that sense of like, oh, I'm really good at this. Like when I was at Michigan, like Isaac Trapkis was there and Evan Primo and like all these guys that are just like mega hotshot players and just super ambitious. That's the other thing about them. Just like really wanted to, always trying to do adventure. Like Evan's a great composer, and he got into that like there. He actually went into a double major when he was at Michigan. And I also met my wife there, Maggie Haspatcher, who's like an incredibly talented bass player and singer, and you just meet these people that are hungry for it, and it humbles you. And then you start to actually focus on intonation and not just like what you're naturally good at, I feel bad for people that never find the like big pond, they're always like, yeah, I'm good in this pond. It's pretty comfy. I've got good algae here. Yeah. And then Indiana was like that for auditions, just everybody's like winning big jobs. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. I guess that's what a podcast is for, right?
There's no format here. So the New York thing I think is cool that how long were you in New York?
I was there for 3 years.
Okay. So did you, and then it was New World after that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So had you been, did you expect to, were you, I'm guessing you were taking auditions at the time and you're playing all those gigs and doing the Road Warrior sort of thing. It must have been cool, but also a contrast to go to somewhere like New World where the objective seems fairly focused to me. It's like train you for the next step, right?
Yeah. So Michigan was like, explore your artistic side. I did 3 recitals there. Didn't even know really about orchestra auditions. Like I knew that it was like a way to make a living as a bass player. So then I went over the summer, I went and I was a counselor at Interlochen, Oh, it's so funny. One of my kids in my cabin was the son. He's a great violinist, actually. His name is Jack McFadden Talbot, and his mom is played Dr. Beverly Crusher on Star Trek.
Wow.
Yeah. And so everybody called him Wesley. Like, and we were watching we were watching Next Generation, like on binging it on Netflix, and every time Leslie would go, they would always go, Wesley, you know, like they were always, oh my God, it was so funny. Anyway, I met Mr. Hurst there, and he got me into, so I went to Indiana, and I saw that like that was a path, and so I went super hard, and like Brian Johnson was there, and Joe McFadden, and like all these other like hotshot players who were going for auditions. So again, like the chip on my shoulder was still there. It was like I was sanding it down, you know, but it was still there a little. And so I had that like, you know, and then so I went to New York because I was like, oh, I want to do something. So I did the freelance scene there, and by that time, that's when I met. So I did the David Grossman thing, and then I met Lee Mesh, and so. And I think I heard you talking with Isaac about, I sent Isaac, I was so glad that he mentioned that, because I sent him there. I remember that day. I was like, you need to go study with Lee, because Lee Mesh is like if you need a bass playing, getting better at audition montage, like Lee Mesh is your, like the trainer that's just like pushing you. And I remember like I played for him once, and he was like, listen, you can pay me $100 every time you come here, and that's fine by me. Or I have this cord of wood that I need chopped, and you're going to chop the cord of wood, and I'll teach you in exchange, you know? And so for 2 years, so after MSM, I was there for 2 years still, I would barter with Lee Mesh, where I would like do housework. I babysat his kids while they were like down in New World coaching, actually. And like, I just went super hard, and I finally started advancing in auditions. I didn't advance like in Indiana. The big push I always made. So instead of like going for like the like lower jobs, like not like lower, like, but like, you know, salary, but not like the, like I saw New York Phil posted a job, you know, when I was in Indiana. So I was like, okay, I'm going to send a tape in. So I worked my butt off, and I got a tape together that was really good, or I thought was good at the time, you know, and I got accepted. And man, that chip on the shoulder was like, all right, now we're really big, you know, awesome. Like, got a tape accepted. That's it. You like basically are making $300,000 a year now. Good job. You know, like, you know, and so the chip was still going, you know, and so I moved to New York. I thought I could do it. And Lee just like took a like metaphorical and actual chainsaw, handed me a chainsaw, and like made me chop down a tree. And that was like me chopping down, whittling it down. So I finally started advancing in auditions, and I subbed 1 week in New World, and I saw New World as like, oh my God, this is like just an opportunity to focus. I don't have to do the grind anymore. They pay you peanuts at New World, but they give you a place to live, and you have dedicated practice space that you can essentially use 24/7. And I just took it really seriously. So I was 27 when I went there. There are people that go to New World when they're like 22, you know, and I was just really like, okay, this is the opportunity. Now, I did have a good time down there too. You know, like you go out, it's really fun down there, but like, man. And then, you know, people like Hal would come down there, and Scott Pingle, Hal Robinson, of course, Scott Pingle would come down there, and Scott Dixon, great. It was great. Max Dimoff, like all these people. And they're like, who do you want down here? And then they'll just like bring this bass player down, and they'll do a residency, and you can just like pick their brain nonstop about bass playing. Not only that, you have other world-class musicians of other instruments that come down, and you can often be like, hey, you know, concertmaster of the Dallas Symphony, like, I'd love to play for you. You know, and MTT is super engaged down there, and he loves the students. And it's a big passion project of his. So that's also great to work with these like world-class conductors. So I spent the full 3 years there, like to the day. And I kept sort of advancing. I would go down and up because it's such a pressure cooker down there. You know, everybody's taking auditions. So it does get a little stressful. But, you know, the bass players that I was there with now, we're we're brothers and sisters for life, you know, that'll always be like a time in our lives that we'll look back on. We just had a Zoom call a couple weeks ago, and it was really great. Like Lee Phillip and Emily Honeyman and Charles Clements, all these great players that are now doing cool and interesting things. Wow. So yeah, New World was really a great experience. Yeah. Learned a lot of rep too.
I'm sure. Yeah. I only subbed down there a little bit, and I had that, you being from California, like maybe that temptation, it sounds like you had a fun time, but that, like for me, I had that same problem that I had when I moved out here. I was like, oh, it's the beach, it's palm trees, it's like somewhere nice, like from South Dakota, and then living in Chicago. I was just like, I know that talking to other people who are kind of like from the Midwest like me, it's like people went on one of two paths. At least this is like in the 90s we're talking about. They would either like hole themselves up at that, you know, and practice. And this, I was subbing before they had the nice theater built. It was like whatever the old facility was. And
the Lincoln Theater.
Yeah, the Lincoln Theater. So they either hole themselves up at the Lincoln Theater and practice, or they just go hog wild and be on the beach all the time and party, and the time would just kind of escape.
Yeah.
Probably there's a middle ground too that people walked, but
you remember that show Melrose Place?
Oh yeah, sure.
Like, yeah, New World's a little bit like that, you know, like everybody lives in the same apartment complex, you know, they're all like young and beautiful, you know, so that there's like that, like, oh, there's a party all times, you know. Yeah. I remember like there was like, you know, this guy, he will not be named, but he would always make this like disgusting alcohol jungle juice mixture, you know, and I'd be like, oh, I'll have one. I'd be hungover for like 2 days off of one of these things, and I'd be like, so and so, you know, like I was hungover for 2 days, like I hate you, and he'd be like, awesome. Needless to say, I don't think he has a job. But anyway, yeah. So, so it was a fun place to be. But it was the practicing that I remember the most. Really, a lot of breakthroughs just sitting in a room alone. That's the other thing. Like, you know, if you're a gregarious person, it's hard to sit alone in a room and like do the scales. You know, it's hard. And so, yeah, that was the discipline of shaving off the chip, I guess.
Did you land because was the next step for you your current gig after New World? So did you land that while you were at New World, or did you have a period, an interval in there, or how did that work?
Funny story. So I turned 30 my last year at New World, I wanted to dispel a rumor. Your life is not over after 30, like young auditioners, okay? Like, just, like, it's actually just beginning. Anyway, they need to know that. But I felt this, and I applied for a fourth year. I didn't get it. Like, you can like, appeal to the powers that be for another year there. And so I was like, okay, there was a spate of auditions that spring. There was like San Diego and Detroit and Atlanta Principal and a couple others, and then Vancouver. And my very good buddy Brendan Kane, who's now in the Met, it was his job. And he was like, dude, you got to go take that. And it was a week after Atlanta, and I was like, so I didn't have anything lined up. I emailed the personnel manager of the Atlanta Symphony, where I had contacts. Joe McFadden's a very good old friend of mine. And they said, can you work the end of the season for us? So I got 4 weeks they offered me 5 weeks of work. I accepted the 5 weeks, knowing that the Atlanta audition was right in the middle of that. So I just got there. I didn't hang out with all my friends. Usually it was a party at that time. That was back when there were like 4 vacancies. And so it was just like a rotating list like of all of the like, and all of our friends just like going and hanging out in Atlanta. It was hilarious. Robin Kesselman was doing that at that time, and Dave Milburn. Like, it was just and Rob Ashley, who I'm sure you know, in the Bay Area.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Like, we're just like, oh man, it was just like so fun. We would just like have a blast. But that month, I did not hang. I sat in the basement of the Woodruff Art Center and just like shed. And I was like, this is it. This is my last shot. This is all I have, like, or else I'm going to have to go like get a CPA or something, you know? And so I worked my butt off, and I didn't advance in Atlanta, and I was like, all right, like that's it. And I just like put it into overdrive, and I came here, and I met Brendan was here. He was seeing someone in the orchestra at the time, so he was actually playing that week here. The Met season was over, and I played for Brendan like 3 times that week before the audition happened. I was like staying in an Airbnb basement. Really cool young guy had me in his like parents' basement, so he didn't mind that I was like practicing. And I walked around. I was like, wow, this is a beautiful place. And, you know, like fate just like has this thing where like all of a sudden it's going to work out, you know, like you just like, this is something is here. Like I'm calm. I'm not stressed. I don't feel forced. And I went in and all the rounds were on the same day. And I felt really good. There were 2 spots open. It was assistant and associate principal at the same time. Yeah, and I had just had, you know, I had found like that chip, like it's a little bit like a rodent's teeth, you know, like like you know how they have to keep chewing or their teeth grow out, right? Like you have to keep practicing or your like little chip on your shoulder starts to grow again, you know.
Right.
So like I always found that like I would like do well in a first round of audition, just like the tape round in that New York Phil audition. I'd be like, all right, like the job is mine now. I advanced out of 1 round, you know, like, and I felt like this time I was able to be like, okay, like you advanced, like it doesn't matter because like there'll always be another audition and you don't have to be a bass player. You know, you don't have to be in an orchestra. Yeah, then I advanced out of the next round and they had the final round. The chip came back a little bit, but there were only 2 of us in the finals. So I remember meeting Evan, who's my colleague, and him being like, does this mean we both get jobs? And it's like, dude, they don't have to hire anybody. Like like if you put that vibe out there, like we're not gonna get anything. So please don't put it out there, you know. But they did. They took a chance on us, and it's been 6 years now. So and it's a great gig. Really fun place.
It's that sense of detachment that seems to be part of the key factors to people when they actually land. So it's so tricky that like there will always be another audition. I don't have to be a bass player. You know, that's something I've heard people talk about, but that's so tough when you're in the moment and you just think, and there's the sunk cost fallacy, you know, or sunk cost, or just the reality of sunk cost. You're like, wow, I've spent how many years, how much money, how much time, how much of my soul, you know, into this. And, you know, that can build like a pressure cooker in people. And it's, you know, we're just like, we can be this house of cards so easily. I know I was when I was auditioning. I had that lovely trajectory of I was getting out of the first round early on, and then you could just graph my downward trajectory in auditions to like never advancing for anything ever. And there are probably lots of psychological reasons for that, but that we don't need to get into. But you know, it's just interesting when people do. It seems so often like that finding a way to just sort of detach yourself emotionally, perhaps from or have a little bit more of a you know, just be more of an observer of this or whatever however you want to describe it. It's tricky.
There's never a dearth of things that you can focus on in either direction. So like the first time I ever advanced was like principal of Alabama Symphony. And I felt so high on my horse until I learned that the guy they hired, like Dan Carson, was like 20. You know, and it was like, oh man, you know, like, so if you focus, so if you're like, oh, I'm awesome, I made the finals, and you feel like, oh, I'm awesome, like you don't have to look far to like to like rip that wallpaper down, you know, like oh, the guy who won it was like way younger, you know, and so you can just like avoid that whole package, you know, like what can be improved is always on the inside. Like your resume is just a piece of paper, and even though it does like affect the way people think about you, maybe that's not what's important in life. I mean, what's important in life is that like internal struggle that you're having. And I still take auditions to this day. And it's so funny because like, you know, that Even though I have all these other projects in the works. And I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, I thought to myself, like, wow, I'm really getting a sign now. Like, you're done. Like, don't take auditions anymore. Like, this is good. You can do other stuff, you know? And then I saw that Cleveland audition, like, posted, and I was like, sent my resume immediately. Like, didn't even think about it, you know? Like, it was so funny. I was like, oh, Cleveland Ogres have an audition? Okay, all right, here it is. And there you go. All right, see you later. Like, you know, like, it's just so funny how it works that way, where you're just like, oh, I'm giving up for good now. It's like, okay, no, I'm still in it. Like, you know,
Well,
I think it's funny. I don't know.
How has it been? This is something David Allen Moore asked me to ask people who are kind of in your shoes. I try to remember to ask it, but like, how has it been for you preparing for auditions now that you have a job? Because that adds probably some stability factors, because you're like, I know I have a situation that I can go back to. It's not like this or CPA. Not that that's the worst thing in the world, but like, you know,
no, it's a great thing to do.
Right. But then also there's the complication of, oh, I'm working. You know, I've got 8 services a week or whatever, and the potential for overuse injury, or just like trying to balance all the things. And then as we get further in life, you get spouses, kids, all sorts of things like that. That there's that too. So like, how has it been for you? It's a pretty wide open question, but how's it been, like, just if you think back to how you used to prepare versus more contemporary things you prepare for?
Oh man. Like, I don't know if does anybody watch this on video, but I feel like a lot of like 20 somethings practice like this. They're like, oh yeah, I'm going to practice.
Out comes the phone.
You know, like, my bass is like right here, you know, like, yeah, man, I was in the practice room for like 7 hours today. And it's like, yeah, it's funny enough, Instagram comes into the practice room with you too. Yeah. Did you know that? You know, I would say that like what I've learned more so than like, because when I first moved here, like I would get to the hall at 8:30 every day, put an hour in of scales, and then like sometimes practice in my lunch break, and then practice until like 9 o'clock at night. But again, lots of that, you know, in the middle, and like not being very organized. More so now that I have kids, like I never pick up my bass without a goal in mind. I never pick up my bass without like a very planned goal in mind. Like it, and that could be, and I'm not talking about like, oh, I'm going to practice Beethoven 5. Like, no, like I need to like think about, I want to take a minute to think about articulation. I want to take a minute to think about intonation. Like I want to focus on the rhythm in this thing, you know, really meditating on what it is in every excerpt that is. Oh, and the other great thing is, now that I've sat on a bunch of audition panels, it is so fun. I'm sure you've sat on auditions before.
Yeah, enough to realize what a different experience it is from that side, and how, you know, this. Yeah, it's enough to realize enough to learn a lot about the whole process.
It's so funny because like, as an auditioner, like when you have emotions on the line and stuff, and you're like, I can't believe they cut me off after I didn't get to play the last 2 excerpts. I can't believe it. Like I was always like that, you know. And then I'm sitting on the thing and I'm like, oh, next, you know, like, you know, like no empathy whatsoever. Like, you know, like, like, oh, you know, like, oh, this is not going to work out, you know, like, no, you know. And it's so funny because it's so good for the other side of the curtain to realize that, like, even though you have all this time and energy invested, like, if you're overweight, your family's not going to call you fat every day. Like they're going to like maybe like once in a while, like encourage you to eat less, you know? But like you go into an audition and there's someone behind the screen and they hear you play for 3 minutes and they say, no, thank you. Awesome. That means you have clear work you need to do. Like someone is telling you, go back and try again. And even though it cost you $2,000 to go to the audition, like, if you're like, that is the best feedback you can get. Like it's amazing, you know? And so I have that in mind now. I have that in mind that like the person, I'm not going to like through like the expression on my face, I'm not going to tell that person how my music making is. I have to invest all my energy in what's coming out of the bass. And so since I've had the job, I record myself I'd record everything. I'm no longer scared. Like, there it is. That's what I got to do. Like, okay, that's what's wrong. Yeah, that stroke is uneven. And guess what? I'm not going to get fired for the stroke being uneven. Nobody's, my wife's not going to leave me, knock on wood, for the stroke being uneven. It's just uneven. So fix it, and so I've gotten a lot, like, I feel like I've managed the chip a lot better. Like, I mean, I'll be honest, like, when you invited me on this podcast, like, the chip was like, it's like, sorry, dude. Like, no, you still have a lot of work to do. And every day you don't practice because you're changing diapers, like, you're going to deserve it less. So, so like, I find that, like, the job has actually humbled me. It's like, okay, like, you have your job, like, you're tenured, it's good. But, like, at the end of the day, I realize what it means now to be a professional. And that means, like, the work that you need to do. Now, like, David Moore, from what I can tell, like, there was a period in his life where he was just, like, laser focused for 8 hours a day or something like that. I mean, I could never do that 8 hours a day of laser focus. For me, it was always like, throw it at the wall, throw it at the wall, throw it at the wall, and then now over time, I've whittled it down. I've had people tell me I've improved like 30%, like, since I've been here. And which is the biggest compliment I could ever get, because the reputation is that, like, you get the job and you don't need to think about it anymore, and that's just not the case. So I enjoy the auditions.
Yeah, progress is so interesting, isn't it? That you might think, like, you reached this pinnacle, but you continue to grow. And, like, boy, it was so interesting to me the couple times I've been on audition committees, how clear things is, like, it's and just how terse my comments were, and people would ask me for feedback, and you just realize, having been on that other side, how just the emotional baggage that you're bringing to the audition, or being nervous behind the screen, it's like it's just that it's one of those things that made me realize, everybody has probably hopefully realized this, how important recording is, but just, like, the objective reality of what you're doing, and it doesn't say anything about you as a human or what. And, like, people are worrying, oh, was I expressive enough in Beethoven 5? It's like, well, you rushed, and it was uneven, and that's what I wrote: rushed and uneven. And, like, maybe I wrote something about tone, maybe, but it's like the things there were so, and that's what I'd been hearing my entire life. But it just that sort of experience really brought it home for me.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, when you think of a professional. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, like, people think about, they see, like, Yo-Yo Ma, and they're like, oh, such emotion or whatever. But, like, I hear Yo-Yo Ma, and I just hear a consummate professional, Mm-hmm. Like, I hear someone that could play literally anything, because he's figured out a system in his mind where, like, his genius can just, like, flow through him, like, broad bandwidth. He's no 56K modem from the gods for Yo-Yo Ma. That guy gets, like, a direct line, no latency. And I think, like, as a teacher, when I'm teaching, I'm trying to prepare students to open the bandwidth to, like, their genius. I think we're all born with, like, some inherent genius, mm-hmm. and it evolves itself in different directions, like, for instance, what you're doing, like, you would be a loss to the world being a full-time member of, like, the Boston Symphony or something, like, this podcast is so much more important for the world, and like, your presence in the bass education, in the bass world, like, imagine how many young people who, like, just found the bass, like, you're expanding their desire and their comfort with, like, pursuing, maybe their parents are telling them to go be a CPA, or something, like, and you're giving them, like, extra, you're interviewing, like, all these different colors of, like, what you could do as a bass player, so, bravo to you and the other people that are doing that. It's really cool.
Well, I appreciate it, man. It's one of those things. There was no plan in mind. This is in many ways the result of me being frustrated by my lack of orchestral audition success. And it's like, I decided to set fire to what I was doing back 15 years ago at this point, and I just started writing about the orchestra. And it's like, I have a very weird career that's resulted for me, just like, but it's been fun. It's been fun to apparently apparently this is what I do, or an element of what I do. He's like, chat with this. But it's the sort of thing I'd want to do anyway, because I'd want to hang out with you here in San Francisco or Vancouver or whatever and talk. This is like, we're having the conversation we'd be having off the mic pretty much anyway. And so it's just cool to do that because I'd want to do that. But we're so busy in life, and particularly young kids and stuff, like carving out time, it's just hard. And so this is a nice way to get something on the calendar, and then that it goes out in the world as this added bonus that I often forget about because it's just you and me talking. I'm just here in my condo in San Francisco. I sort of forget that this goes out, and then I look back some of that old school John Gorilla stuff. It's hilarious. Like some of those things, like 50,000, 60,000 downloads. Some of those things have had, and I think like, whoa, it's like this Stone Age technology John and I were using to talk to Mr. Hurst or Ed Barker or some of those people. But it's crazy. It's crazy, but it's cool to see people hang their shingle out and put something out in the world. This has been fun for me. What you've been doing, and I mean that's why I would have wanted to talk to you anyway. But I was like on Facebook one night, I think, or something, or YouTube, and just checking out some of these videos that you've been putting out, and I was like, oh, look at what Noah's doing. It's pretty cool. And that's been some of your other pandemic work, right?
Yeah. So Maggie is a singer and an artist. She's a songwriter. She's also subs with the symphony. She's another like polymath, if you want to use that word. It's kind of a weird word, I don't. But anyway, like why is math in there? Like don't make me think about math. No, anyway. She's so we just thought to ourselves. So we were walking along the beach. And we live like 3 blocks from the beach here, Kitts Beach, which is a hilarious beach. It's really fun in the summer. You would think you're in like a beach town, even though it's rainy. Anyway, I digress again. Anyway, we found all these little purple mollusk shells, like purple. There's little purple shells everywhere. So we thought, as we always joke, like, oh, that'd be a good band name or whatever. We were like, yeah, wouldn't that be a cool name for like a production company, Purple Mollusk Music? You know, we were gonna do Purple Mollusk Studios, but that acronym is a little problematic. So anyway, so Purple Mollusk Music it is, and we just started like putting together content. So everything you see on YouTube currently is iPhones. And so we set up like 3 or 4 iPhones because I found like, attention spans. One of the big problems I have with like YouTube videos of bass players is like, they set up a thing and you're looking at the thing, but that's just not how our brains are right now. Like our brains want narrative through videography. So, so we set up multiple angles. And then I can recommend it to anybody. So I'm sorry if you have a lot of audio engineers among your podcast listeners, but their job is really not as hard as they make you think it is. I mean, like if you have ears, that's what you really need is ears. So I think and a talented audio engineer would tell you that too, is like their ears are their best asset. Mm-hmm. But I read this book with like, I don't know, just like Getty images on the front of it, but Audio Made Easy, or How to Be a Sound Engineer Without Really Trying, by published by Hal Leonard. The guy's name is Ira White. Anyway, and it's just basic stuff about like how to do audio engineering. I got my DAW, I got like Logic, and I just started fiddling around. I have a Zoom H6. I got these Neumanns. This is the biggest purchase, was these Neumann KM184s. And yeah, we've just been like setting it up and doing it ourselves. We rent out the hall where everything is filmed is the recital hall at the Vancouver Symphony School, VSO School of Music. We have our own school of music where I teach also. Yeah, I just had the opportunity to start doing that. And there's more in the pipeline. Hopefully, I don't know when you plan on producing this. Hopefully I have a couple more out before this airs, but either way, we're working hard for Purple Mollusk Music. Noah Reitman is just my YouTube handle, and Maggie Haspatcher is what Maggie's doing, and we've been working together on songwriting too, and that's just been the thing, because what really got me into music was not like going to orchestra auditions. It was sitting like performing something and then like people clapping, like, wow, they're like clapping for me, like chip on the shoulder coming out, so just getting back to like the artistic elements of why we do this. I mean, there's obviously artistry in orchestral bass playing, but solos are just so much fun to put together, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I find.
Yeah, for sure. And especially when you're playing in an orchestra, when that's like the day job or you know, along with teaching and other things, to have something that you can have that creative visual control over. That's so cool that I've been digging what you're doing, you know, and this will probably come out early July, something like that. So you'll probably have a couple more out. So I'll just make sure to keep my eyes out and link up to everything. But
thanks.
The whole videography thing, that's been like one of my personal pandemic projects too. I'd been getting into making better YouTube videos. Like in 2019, I started buying some gear, and then I got busy and was just doing my typical the travel stuff I do, and then that all stopped in March, and so I started buying some more gear and playing around, and I've been trying to slowly but surely get some different angles and just kind of understand. With a company I work for, Eastman Music Company, they're down in LA. I work in a couple roles for them, but one of them I work with the marketing people, and the head of marketing is a film a videographer. So it's been interesting just kind of like learning a little bit more about the craft. I have no designs on anything except like film better bass event content when I go. I got one bass event with my good gear. I went to the Pittsburgh Double Bass Symposium in March 2020, and I filmed things. And I got some great footage of Larry Hurst teaching, actually. I got all these photos. I call it like the many faces of Mr. Hurst. I got him like, just he's such an expressive person when he's doing his thing. So I'm looking for it. It's been a long 15 months of not doing that, but I think I'm going to go to Wabass later this month and start to break out the gear. But it's fun what you can, you know, these times we live in, what you can do with a phone alone, or a phone and a couple good mics and an H6, you're good to go. You're making, you know, professional level content.
Yeah, and that's so like, that's something that going back to like this pandemic and what I hope my colleagues have grown from is like, you know, I was always teaching. I could be very picky about who I teach before. I mean, like I was very picky about, like, I teach these chamber ensembles that are just great. And I have a couple hungry students, but like the majority of my like work life away from home was just like, roll up to the hall, unpack the bass. The only technology I needed to use was my tuning app, you know, and then go for it, you know? And I have to say, it's been so fun to like learn this new stuff. Like, my God, it's so cool. Like, and then you know, Maggie's been doing more of the editing. She figured out Final Cut a lot better, but I'm like sitting in there and I'm like, how do I drag the, you know, I you know, when like boomers ask millennials like to like do their like stuff for them, they always ask me. It always makes me feel horrible because I never have the right answers. But I found that it's just been really fun to like, and like it's getting more like creative. It's like, because like, you know, you're like, oh, you can actually tell a story through film, like as a documentarian. And I actually come by it honestly because my mom, she started as a potter, and she has a very successful gallery in Los Angeles. She has a craft gallery called Freehand. And when I was in high school, she's just a naturally gifted people person. And when I was in high school, she had you know, this gallery, there's a lot of Hollywood types that go shop there. It's like handmade jewelry. So, you know, for instance, I don't think it's too bad to name drop, but like George Clooney would come every December, and he'd just like drop down $20K on like jewelry for all of his staff. Like he would just like boom, boom, boom. And it was always like so exciting, you know, but he wasn't involved, but like there would be other studio types, you know, producers and stuff like that, and cinematographers. And then the other clientele was just like extremely wealthy people. And she would be like, I have a vision. I have this dream. I want to make a series where I just go talk to artists and it's going to be called Craft in America. And it's going to be on PBS. Like she would just say that, you know, and, you know, most people would be like, okay, you know, like, okay, good. But she got like 20 people being like, yes, let's do this. And so now she's had this show on called Craft in America. It's on PBS. She started it in her late 50s. She won a Peabody Award on the first season. Like, she's like goes around the country interviewing artists and highlighting their work. You can check it out, craftinamerica.com. She always does classical. I mean, she does instrument makers as some of her thing. So I finally got one of my faves on there. Sue Lipkins is going to be featured in the next music episode.
Wow.
So yeah, it'd be pretty cool. One of my bows is Sue Bow. I love Sue. She's like one of my favorite people in the world. So have you had her on the podcast?
Yeah, I did. It's been a minute. I actually just had my third. I've talked to very few bow makers. I've talked to three now. A guy named Patrick Staples, who plays up in Calgary.
Oh yeah,
started making
Calgary. Yeah.
He started making bows a couple years ago, and they're supposed to be awesome.
Really?
Yeah, I've got one or two headed my way to check out. So, but yeah, I had Sue on like 2015 or something like that. And yeah, what a cool person. Obviously, fascinating bow maker. How cool that your mom started, and how cool to just say, hey, I'm going to do this. It's going to be on PBS. And you set a big goal. It's amazing. The worst that happens is you maybe don't quite achieve that goal. If you set some modest goal and you don't achieve, so it's amazing what the power of just dreaming big can do.
Yeah, and it's also like you have to like organically like follow your vision, like we were talking about before, and so that's been kind of fun. So I always have that in my mind. I have this figure in my, and she also, like, my dad died when I was a kid. She was a single mom from when I was 7. She had this business that she was running that whole time. And then she, and like you just meet a person like that, or you are exposed to a person like that, and you think anything's possible. So that was probably a little why I like went for that New York Philharmonic audition and was like perennially frustrated. It was also like, oh, you could just get whatever goal you want, right? Like, it just takes 10 years. It did take her 10 years from when she had the design or the idea to when it was aired on TV. So it's time and energy. And like for you, for instance, like, yeah, you say like, oh, like I just want to do it. Like, I just want to like video show based content, but like, who knows where it could go? You could take this somewhere else. I'm sure you're open to it too. It's like keeping your ambition.
Oh yeah, for sure. Who knows? All I've learned doing all this like indie content for the last 15 years is you never know where it's going to lead you but yeah, the dreaming big thing, there's something to that. And it's just amazing how many people I've met that said, I want to do this. And it might sound crazy, but they ended up doing just that. Nick Villalobos, a buddy of mine in Phoenix, Arizona, he said, I want to tour the world playing cover tunes, but in my violin, cello, bass trio. That's exactly what they do. There's simply 3 and they cover, and there are so many, like, go out to New York, Louis Levitt. I want to play string quintets. I want to build that, but only things we commission. And, it's just like very specific. Hey, here we are doing it. And so I don't know, over the years, I've realized how much more possible it is to do that finding that thing you're fascinated by. That's actually a line I lifted from Diana Gannett, interviewing her years ago. It's like advice you'd give to a young person going off to college. I don't remember the exact question, but she was just like, figure out what fascinates you. What do you wake up in the morning just thinking about and you're consumed with? Go do that. And I think that's good advice.
Yeah, it was cool. When I graduated, she gave me this like stack of magnets, like fridge magnets, with like all of her favorite little aphorisms on them. We still have them on the fridge. Like, one is like, rant, release all negative thoughts.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, like, use your back. That's her favorite line. I'm sure you've heard that before. Use your back. And that's a Gary thing too. Yeah. Just like, your whole body, it's all goes back to the back, right?
She had, thinking about like feeling pressure and I'll share this. I don't want to talk you to death here. We got to do a round 2 at some point here. But I moved out here in 2016 and I was doing the Golden Gate Bass Camp and I was playing on the faculty recital, and I'm a fine bass player, but I'm no bass soloist or anything like that. So who's playing on it? Who starts the recital off? Diana Gannett playing solo Bach. Who's next? Me. Who's after me? Rufus Reed. So it's like the sort of thing that Jason, go back a few years, like there would be be very rational to feel like highly inadequate in that moment. But I had this, but it was weird. It was something about I'd been getting more into the bass community thing, and we just had a great week of teaching together. And I thought, you know what, Diana's sharing this beautiful thing that she's doing, and I'm going to get up and share what I do. It's this very hippie. Maybe it was moving to San Francisco, but it was this very sort of hippie kind of and I was just like, I didn't have any nerves, and it was really weird. And I don't know, or maybe I'm just getting older, or I don't know what it is, but it's one of those things that definitely could have seen that being terrifying and not going in a way that I would have remembered fondly. But it ended up being this beautiful thing, and so I don't know what that says about.
No, I think it relates to the thing I'm talking about the chip. I mean, I think we all have it, especially coming out of like adolescence, where you just want to make your mark in the world. You know, you just want to prove yourself. And so someone gives you an opportunity to prove yourself, and you focus so much on the proving of yourself that you don't actually like do the work, you know? Whereas like when you just like, you're like, I honestly tried my hardest and I'm going to honestly put it out there, you know, and that's what these people are doing around me, you know? I think that's when it becomes easy. I mean, it's when the chip is nicely taken care of, and you can just say like, it doesn't matter whether or not I belong among these people. I'm just going to do my honest best. Right. You know, and that's the humility that's involved in that is so important as a performer. It's really something. It's really cool. And Diana is amazing. She's the most humble person you'll ever meet. I mean, she's so calm and you know, obviously there's a raging river inside of her, you know, which is so cool. You know, it's that placid, you know, my grandma always used to say, still waters run deep, you know. It's like, whoa, that's intense, Grandma. There's another one that was like that, but yeah, no, and that's so cool. Is GGBC happening this year?
Not this year. I'm confident it'll come back in 2022. I had one of these, you know, we were talking earlier about freelancers. I had this the last time my bass left that corner there, besides obviously practicing, you know, the last time I went out that front door was March 2020, and we were playing this bass quartet, this Andres Martin bass quartet for the San Francisco Bass Bash, and it was this weird thing where like they had everything was just about to shut down, but they hadn't. So they said the kids couldn't come, but we could still have the recital. So we flew poor Xavier Foley all the way across the country to play for my video camera, you know, and then we played that quartet, and the other three people are Bay Area freelancers, and then I had this very dark Zoom call in like fall 2020 with all of them. We had like like you were talking about the New World folks, we had this what's going on, and everybody was like looking at a second career, because the orchestras, going back to the union point, you know, they're coming back, but all those people, they had relied on people subbing out or gigs coming on, and so who knows what the future holds. I mean, they're all doing fine and managing, and they're scrappy folks, but we did a you know, like everybody, like a virtual bass bash this year, and then this summer it's not happening just because it takes place in this private school. How are we going to figure all that out? But it'll be back 2022, hopefully. And that's one of those fun. I love events like that. I look forward to that week. It's so fun to you know, teach amongst people like, you know, that year I was talking about Rufus Reed, Diana Gannett, and then we got just and Richard Duke, who organizes it. He's been focusing a little bit more on like Bay Area based community and bringing in more electric players, and it's a really fun week.
Oh, that's cool. I did it when I was in high school, actually.
That's
awesome.
Awesome.
That's where I met Diana. I met Diana there. I met David Murray and a bunch of, it was a really fun thing. I miss California a lot. I really, you know, every time an audition comes up in California, I always screw it up because I want it so bad.
Well, it's funny, like moving out here, you know, my brother lives in Portland, and I might have said this at the beginning, but like I used to think of Portland as being just like next door to San Francisco. It's like 700 miles away. It's So it's been interesting being out here, because there are so many people that live on the West Coast. You know, if we take these big cities and we include Vancouver too, but there's this vast open land between the rest of the country. I've never felt like kind of separate from the rest of the people. And I grew up in the Midwest. It's just interesting being out here. You're always starting the day late because you're 3 hours behind the East Coast. It's just it's a funny experience.
Yeah, it's funny actually. I mean, the funniest thing to me, it's growing up in Southern California. Like you're sort of, you have there's like a layer you learn, especially where I grew up in the sort of west side of LA. So a little bit more of the snobby, like Hollywood area, and you I don't want to say a bad word. You're a BS artist. Okay. Like you have there's this thing that you can do when you're in LA, or no, not when you're in LA. There's this way you can make someone feel like you're totally sympathetic or copacetic. And then you're just like, we are definitely going to try to do that. Definitely. And then no commitment whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think when I moved to the Midwest, like people don't if you try to BS them like one too many times, like they don't want to be your friend anymore. Like they just don't want to, like you have to be a pretty reliable person to be like friends with people. Mm-hmm. And I dug that a lot. I really dug that. Maggie will tell you, like, she's so funny. We met when we were undergrads, but like she didn't, she studied with David Moore at USC. And so she called me and she asked like, oh, like, hey, like I'm moving to LA, and we were just friends. I was living in New York at the time. And I was like, oh, well, I'll introduce you to my mom. Like, she can maybe hook you up. And sure enough, like my mom loves Maggie. She's loved her since day one. And she put her to work at her gallery. So, and it was like, she started working at my mom's gallery and she was like, oh, now I get it. Like now I get why he's so full of it, but it was that time getting better at the bass that sort of took away some of the like phoniness that I think California breeds in some of its people. I'm sorry to blame 40 million people for my shortcomings. I don't mean to do that.
Hey, but, someone who's a Midwesterner who moved here, and there, I think there are different kinds of phoniness in the Bay Area versus Southern California. It's been interesting to like learn about if I stereotype
the rivalry.
Southern Californians think we're a bunch of pretentious Patagonian wearing, snobs, like going to venture capital meetings in our startups, and we think they're a bunch of vapid airheads reading their scripts in their convertibles. But it's funny. I never knew this term, and I don't know if this is a term in Southern California too, but they talk here in the Bay Area about people being ducks, which means they seem real cool, but they're just like going underneath the surface. And that's something that
totally.
Yeah. That's something I never would see it's a little more out in the open in the Midwest, but I've definitely seen that. It's like laid back, but it's kind of very interesting.
Well, you are what you drive in Southern California, right? Like everybody's driving around a Tesla. Now it's a Tesla, but when I was a kid, it was a Beamer or like a Mercedes or something. And so I was like, well, I have to have one of those if I want to be liked by the people around me. I did not have a Mercedes or a BMW, but I wanted one, like because of that, and the closest I could get was a Volvo. Love that car. But anyway, I miss it. I really do. But a great bass car. But I moved to the Midwest where everybody's driving like a rusty Ford Fusion. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, like that's right. Everybody knows that. And guess what? Like the people in LA couldn't afford that car. Like they were spending like 30% of their income paying the lease payment on this car so that people would think that they were the cool duck like you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But secretly they were like, how am I going to pay for this car? Mm-hmm. Whereas people live a little bit more within their means, I think, in the Midwest, which is easier to do. Let's face it. But
for sure. I also, having, way more of my life in the Midwest than here, I also get the appeal of California, at least my experience in California. It's been a fun journey for me, and I also had a career transition and everything. But like, boy, I got to tell you, moving somewhere that's just got more access to natural beauty, like I know you have in Vancouver, really, both Southern and Northern California have. You can be. I'm looking at horses in Marin County within 20 minutes of driving, from my place, and just having a place where it's just generally pretty nice out all the time has had such a big impact on my overall mood. I never realized that those long stretches, and I know you get a lot more rain than we do here, but it's still, you're not getting like snowed on and digging your car out, and it's probably, you probably take that over the Chicago, Michigan kind of winter experience. It's been interesting.
How do you like that? How do you feel about the culture in San Francisco? Like, I mean, like arts, and I mean, just the people you meet. And
sure. Well, you know, everybody has for the last says about San Francisco, oh, you should have been here 10 years ago. It was great. It's trash now. But they've also been saying that since like 1880. So it to me, it felt like everybody's like, oh, it's so boring now. Everybody's left. The tech has driven everybody out, and they're not wrong. There is that. We're in North Beach, which is kind of like, it's too far north for people in tech to really, like, it's a little too inconvenient. So North Beach is like one of the last places pretty much or largely untouched. And I am like the last bass player in San Francisco, and it's just because my wife's a doctor. Like most people live in the East Bay or way out by the beach, you know, the south, the west side of the city. But it's still, there's still a lot going on, certainly in the Bay Area in general, and even within San Francisco. I think there are enough independent art galleries and such, more so than my experience in Chicago. And I'll tell you, it's interesting to watch during the pandemic, because like San Francisco's problems were, you know, the unbelievable homeless problem, certainly, and then just the ridiculous real estate market, you know. And I know Vancouver grapples actually kind of with both of those, certainly the real estate, but it's been interesting to watch my neighborhood of North Beach, which like things had been closing before the pandemic. The last couple jazz clubs had closed, and I've actually seen, I wouldn't say, certainly more than I expected survived, and I've actually seen some new indie places opening up. There's this kooky place called the Art Mart. They took over an old bank, and it was the sort of thing that you're like, all right, this is lasting for 1 month. And they've been going, they opened before the pandemic. They opened in December 2019, and they're going strong. They have all these showings and like DJs and events. And, you know, I hear like different, like there's a jazz band here. There's a singer-songwriter over here on the other side of the street. They've got the Bay Area Blues Mobile, or no, Bay Area Jazz Mobile comes in and sets up in Washington Square Park and plays. So it seems pretty vibrant to me. It's complicated. It's a tough place to be an artist for sure, like many places. But I think there's a lot going on. That's a very long way of saying I think there's a lot going on.
Well, it's interesting because like what I found here, first of all, like it's funny. There's some basic differences between Canada and the U.S. One of which is the American Revolution happened, and Canada was like, we're good. Like, we're fine. It's all right. The Queen's still on the money here, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like, sets, believe it or not, like even 200 years later, it sets the tone. Mm-hmm. Because it says like, because in the US, it's like, oh, that thing, it's broken. We're not going to do it anymore. We're going to do this now. Like, I have this great idea. And then that person becomes like a billionaire, you know, because they came up with this new way to do something. And you probably have more billionaires per capita in the Bay Area than you do like anywhere else. Now, obviously, say what you want about the rich, you know, like soak the rich, whatever, you know, and sure, they should probably be paying more taxes. But when somebody is creative in business, they like to support creative people. What we have up here is the reason why the market is so expensive here is because people are getting their money out of Asia. Mm-hmm. Like they want to get their money out of Asia, and so they buy real estate here. And they're operating the real estate at a loss, actually. Like, you know, even if they are renting the place out, like a mortgage payment would be like $3,000 a month, and they're only earning $2,000 a month in rent. You know, like that, they'll kind of, because they think it'll just keep going up in value. So there's a little bit of it's a shell. Like the money is here, but it's not like because of some massive innovation like in the Bay Area. You know, like, holy smokes. I mean, Google, Facebook, like Apple, like all these companies that are part of everybody's life. I'm staring at an Apple right now, you know, like, you know, using Zoom, which is probably in the Bay Area too. You know, I don't actually know where they are, you know, but It's so funny and so like that's what you see, like the ballet and the symphony and the opera like producing a living wage for their musicians. Now I really hope that none of our board members are some of your podcast listeners. Oh, that's possible. But a lot of them are like upper level management, like accountants, at like our chair of our board is like a principal at Deloitte, so like, this is like, regardless of how intelligent and actually visionary I think he is, like I really do think he is a really great visionary guy. We're talking about a salaried employee here. We're not talking about a billionaire that's like, oh, you need money at the symphony? Oh, here's $50 million, because I'm going to save a lot on taxes and I believe in what you do. It's just not that culture up here. Of the arts, there's just not like, there's not somebody that's like, I'm going to put my stamp on this city by green lighting and a beautiful concert hall. Instead, like, we rent our hall from the city, the Orpheum, and if there's a movie in town, they'll kick us out, no problem. They'll be like, you're out of here for 3 days because there's a movie. I'm not allowed to go get my bass like off hours. Like I have to keep it elsewhere, so like it's wild. It's a big difference in my opinion.
Yeah,
but
isn't that interesting?
I know it's like that in the States somewhere.
Right across the border. It's having such a it's funny. My wife would go to Mark Zuckerberg Memorial Hospital. No kidding. That's what they renamed San Francisco General. It is interesting to be. That was another big eye-opener for me moving to San Francisco, is like walking down the street and you're like, well, there's Twitter, there's Firefox, there's Uber, there's Lyft, there's it's definitely and there's something kind of exciting about being around that. It's also places of a lot of haves and haves not, so you have like people having major episodes right out, the need some social help, right outside of Salesforce Tower and that sort of thing. So it's a confusing place. It's also an exciting place. It's been a fun move for me. I've called the cops way more in my life than I ever have in these few years.
Didn't you find a dead guy or something?
Yeah. We started by finding a dead body in the park. When we
remember
were
that now.
Yeah. It was a very my wife. We were just walking in Golden Gate Park and she said, "That's a dead body," and it didn't look violent. It looked like he was an older guy. Who knows what happened? But we called 911 and then came, and so that was a somber one. But I've also, oh my goodness, like people break into the car right in front of me, smash and grab. It's like 911, also hide, and then I had one time I was waiting for the train and these two young women came running up to me. It was like at 10 p.m. or something, and they said, "Help, there's a crazy man chasing us." And sure enough, it's like if you could put in a textbook what you would be of like caricature of a crazy guy. This this guy came running up, and it was raining, so I just like put my umbrella down and he was like looking under the umbrella, and then the train comes, I'm like, well, I was gonna get on that train, so they get on the train with me, and the conductor's like keeping him off, and I don't even know, another 2 or 3. All I know is I called 911 maybe never in Chicago, and I think it's been a good, so it's a crazy, I think part of it is it's just such a small place. It's like everything's I think the crime rate's actually significantly lower here than Chicago, but you're so on top of each other, kind of like a mini Manhattan in some ways, so you just sort of see everything. Sure. So
well, it's funny too, because like I think about what we consider the United States from a European immigrant perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Like the U.S. was founded by two basic groups of people: is the real people seeking religious freedom and like total like huckster scammers. That's just like, and it's just like built into the like DNA, and San Francisco even more so, because how many people came for the gold rush? Right. How many? And like think about you, like you have to think like the people that went, like there were people like you and I, like. Mm-hmm. They were our age at some point, like we think about them as some historical, thing, but they like lived a daily life, and something in their life like made them be like, I'm sorry, I'm giving up everything here and I'm going to go find gold. on the other side of the country, you know?
Right. I mean,
Who
they're
were
going to
those
ride.
people?
I mean, they're either going to ride a wagon across this continent and the Continental Divide, or I'm going to take a ship all the way around the Horn and come up. Yeah. No, it's interesting, and I think that sort of is built into which is part of what's kind of cool about this place. And you just look at all the multiple, you know. So it's interesting to live in a place that's got that sort of dynamic history, and it's got its problems, but it's been a fun transition. So, and it's the only place I've ever lived where I've actually like I've always been living somewhere, but always like driving to the suburbs to teach or driving around and being a road warrior. It's the only place, and especially this last year and a half, my goodness, I barely left the city, but I feel much more a citizen of San Francisco than I ever did of Chicago. I would like hang out on the weekends, but I'd always be teaching high school or playing a gig or something like that. So it's been nice to be more rooted in a city. You might feel the same thing being in Vancouver too.
Totally. I mean, man, our life was like, I'd go to auditions or go see family or whatever, and then play. Now, like when the pandemic hit, we took the time to like see every park, like every, you know, municipal park and every provincial park, like in the area. And it was special. It was really special. I mean, I love it here. I feel like an American. I miss home. I miss, there's a little more, you know, the social programs here are amazing, but I think it saps a little bit of the creative drive to skirt the rules. I don't know, like the US did a sickeningly embarrassingly job with the pandemic, you know, 500,000 people dead. Like that's embarrassing, you know, but they also like took that opportunity to like find a vaccine very quickly. I mean, obviously other countries had hands in that too, but and then administer it very quickly. Obviously now we're like hitting the point where people like don't want it, you know, it's convincing the people that don't actually want to get it. But like finding like that ingenuity and that like, and also like giving up Trump, you know, I don't want to, you know, I'm sure that people are happy with Trump and I don't criticize them, but like, look, like everybody talked for 4 years about like how it was going to be like a new dictatorship. People changed their mind and they voted somebody else in. Like, wow, like democracy, amazing, you know, like wow, so cool, you know, like, and I miss that. I mean, they have democracy here too, but like something about that whole process made me feel very American and made me miss it a lot. And but then there's things here like, I don't know, we just had a baby 6 weeks ago. You go to the women's hospital, which by the way is a hospital only for giving birth, basically. Okay, we're there overnight. Like baby comes out, all the bings and bongs, same thing as the US, a little more laid back. Like there were only 4 people in the room, you know. Like, have I received a bill? No. Like, yes, I pay a little more in taxes, of course. Like, have I received like any kind of bill for anything? Like, nope. In the US, when we had our first child, we kept getting billed because like we saw all these different pediatricians, like, and they weren't our like primary one, so we just kept getting like these like $800 bills, you know, and I had to like figure it out, and we didn't end up having to pay them. But you know, like it's just like that's been a wonderful part of being here, which is just like, okay, you have a guaranteed like baseline here, you know. But I miss the hunger. I miss the like, okay, I gotta make something of myself, you know?
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword for sure. I remember talking to Jennifer Downing Olson. She's in Gothenburg and came back and played Grant Park for years and years. I know her from the freelancing in Chicago days, but you know, they've had, I believe, 2 kids in Sweden, and just that whole social system over there too. You know, it definitely, the innovation thing, it's a real thing in the US. And yeah, it's interesting to really get into it because it can be very frustrating to not have those social programs and to look at how, especially people that do like what we do, are artists or just people who, it allows you to take a chance in many ways that are challenging in the US, but at the same time you do have that reward that can come with you know, the ingenuity in the US. So hey man, no, we got to do this in person one of these days. I know. I'm sorry. We barely scratched the surface. I knew we'd have a good time, but it's it's great to hang out with you, man. I really appreciate it. I think I have everything I need. I'll look up to your website. I'll link up to Maggie's YouTube as well as your tube if that's cool.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And anything else, anywhere else you want? I think I have everything on there that I need. Anywhere else you want me to send folks in particular?
We didn't really talk about it, but all of I'm playing a lot of fun stuff on the concerthall.ca, which is a VSO's portal. Mm-hmm. If people want to check out, we have a lot of fun. I got to play this Wynton Marsalis piece. It was really cool, and just some great solo bass stuff. It was really lucky this year. Got to do a lot of solo bass. It was like a year of career highlights.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, isn't that? It's so random. As assistant principal, like I sit principal not that often in normal times, but because we're all split up, I'm sitting principal all the time, getting to play all these cool solo licks.
Noah, you rock, sir. Can't wait to do a round two. Folks, check him out at noahreitman.com. He's doing so many cool things and just a great human being, and I had a blast chatting with him. I am recording these outros here at the very end of June on my recovery day from coming back from the Roboth Institute, LA, and WABASE. I am pumped to dig into all this footage I got. I had been planning on doing the sort of thing I just did for the last. I went to Pittsburgh Double Bass Symposium and got some footage. It was the first time I'd really gotten to a bass event and gotten some what I think of as decent footage. And that sparked the interest in me of doing much more of that. And then I've just been biding my time like everybody in the world for the last 16, 18 months, whatever. And finally got out with my camera, with my lenses, been thinking a lot about filmmaking and just telling a story in visual terms since the pandemic hit. And it has been was so great to get to test out what I've been thinking about and what I learned. And you couldn't ask for better or more exciting and supportive collaborators than Silito de Jesus for the Roboth Institute and Renan Meyer in team for WABASE. I will probably be sharing some of this on the podcast. I will absolutely be sharing on YouTube and I'm not even sure, there's at least going to be one video about both of them. I think there are going to be multiple videos, probably about both of them, certainly about WABASE, because I got so much footage and I just have to get into that. So I guess I better shut up here. Okay. Definitely check out Noah. Noah is awesome. If you have an idea for a guest, reach out to me, feedback@contrabassconversations.com. And I'd love to hear from you. Yes, let's close out. Thank you so much to the team who puts these podcasts together. Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, and Trevor Jones. Mitch makes beautiful basses just east of Dallas-Fort Worth in Kilgore, Texas. Such a great person, doing great work, all the good things. Learn more about what he does at mitchmooring.com. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we'll see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.